Welcome back to Reading with Mo. Today we're going to be talking about books that are coming out in the next 3 months, the first 3 months of 2024 that I wanted to share with you guys that sound interesting. I have a lot of books I want to share with you guys. I think we're talking about somewhere in the ballpark of 50 books just for the first quarter of 2024, which is good and bad. Good because, of course, who wouldn't be excited that there's a whole bunch of books coming out that sound very interesting, but bad because one might ever going to have the time to read all of these. I can guarantee you now, I'm not going to get to all these books. I will attempt to read a few for sure and put them into my TBRs over the upcoming months. Fortunately, I do have access to the Libby app where I'm able to check out audiobooks and ebooks for free from my library. So that's how I get around to reading so many new releases. I'm going to need your guys' help though, because obviously, since I can't read all of these, if you do end up reading any of these, I need you to let me know which ones are worth it or not, and which ones I should continue to keep on my TBR for the future. Since there are so many books that I wanted to share with you guys, I'm going to just jump straight into them. So the books we'll talk about first will be for the first month, books that are coming out in January. As of posting this, I know it's a couple weeks into January, so some of these books will already be available for you to purchase or check out from your library already. Also, I'm not going to be giving super long synopsises on each of these books because there are so many I want to share with you guys. Feel free to look up more in-depth descriptions if you want to know a little bit more before you jump into some of these books. First up, we have Divine Might, Goddesses in Greek Myth by Natalie Haynes. This is a historical nonfiction book. I have read a couple of fiction books from Natalie Haynes, so I haven't read anything nonfiction yet. I was able to receive an ARC of this book though, so this is one I'm going to be getting around to reading for sure. It's the follow-up to Pandora's Jar, which has been sitting sadly on my shelves. I have not gotten to that yet, so I'm going to have to read that one and then I will pick this up. This book is a female-centered look at Olympus and the Furies, focusing on the goddesses whose prowess, passions, jealousies, and desires rival those of their male kin. Next up, we have a mystery thriller, and this is First Lie Wins by Ashley Elston. I haven't read anything from this author previously. We're following our main character, Evie, who is moving in with her new boyfriend, Ryan, but that's not her real name. It's actually her alias. And she is working for an operative called Mr. Smith, and Ryan is her mark. This sounds like a very fun, action-y thriller. We have a book called Nonfiction by Julie Meyerson, but this is actually a fiction novel. This book is described as two parents who stand by powerlessly as their only child seems intent on destroying herself. The mother, who's a novelist, attempts to understand her daughter. She finds herself revisiting her own uneasy, unresolved relationship with her mother. Cover on this one is just gorgeous. Next up, we have a debut book, and that is Rabbit Hole by Kate Brody. This is a mystery thriller, and it's exploring the dark side of true crime fandom and the blurry lines of female friendship. Conspiracy theories from Reddit seduce a disaster-prone woman into an obsession with solving her older sister's cold case disappearance. Then we have My Friends by Hisham Matar. I previously read The Return by this author, gave it a 5-star rating, so I want to check this one out. This is a fiction book, and it's about friendship, family, and the unthinkable realities of exile. We're following a young boy who's growing up in Benghazi. He hears this weird story that's read on the radio about a man being eaten alive by a cat, and he becomes obsessed with it, and eventually it puts him on a journey that takes him far from home to pursue a life of the mind at the University of Edinburgh. Then we have No Reservations by Cheryl Lister. In this fiction book, we're following 4 friends, 3 struggling relationships, and 1 final wish: find happiness. This sounds like a very heartwarming book. We are following 4 friends who, after one of them passes away, go and take a girls' trip to Jamaica together. Next up, we have One of the Good Guys, a novel by Araminta Hall. This is a mystery thriller. It's asking the question, if most men claim to be good, why are most women still afraid to walk home alone at night? Our main character, Cole, has just separated from his wife, and he's leaving London for a fresh start in the countryside. That's where he meets Leonora, who's the reclusive artist who lives next door. There's a connection formed between them when 2 young women activists in the area disappear, and somehow they start getting involved in the mystery and being involved in the investigation. Next up, we have Poor Dear by Claire Oshetsky. This is a novel about a young girl who's dealing with her role in a tragic loss. They're following Margaret, who her first memory is the day that her friend Agnes dies. No one's blaming her. Her mom insists that her daughter never even left the house, but she is trying to make sense of the tragedy. And then there's this thing called Poor Dear, who's a strange and formidable creature who winds her way uninvited into Margaret's made-up tales and will not rest until Margaret faces the truth about her past and atones for her role in Agnes's death. Next up, we have a book in translation, and that is Turmush by Sven Holm and Sylvia Clayton. This is a science fiction novel. It takes place at Turmush, which at this resort, the real luxury is safety. This is a rediscovered classic of Scandinavian fiction that's still shockingly relevant more than 50 years after it's first published. This place, Turmush, caters to every need of its wealthy patrons. Everyone within its walls has been promised full protection from the after effects of the disaster. Eventually, it becomes clear that the residents can't insulate themselves from the physical effects of the cataclysm, nor the moral fallout of using their wealth to separate themselves from those who are still trapped outside. Then we have The Heiress by Rachel Hawkins. This is a mystery thriller book, and it's also described as a gothic suspense, so that sounds very interesting to me. It's about an infamous heiress and the complicated inheritance that she has left behind. Then we have The Waters by Bonnie Jo Campbell. In this fiction book, it's described as a rural noir, and it's about exceptional women and the soul of a small town. Next up, we have a sequel that a lot of people are looking forward to. I haven't read the first book yet, but I just wanted to mention it, and that is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands, which this is a fantasy romance book, and this is the second installment in the Emily Wilde series. I believe the first book was called something like Encyclopedia of Fairies or something like that. I'm not going to read the description of the sequel because I'm pretty sure it's going to spoil things from the first book. And I haven't read the first one yet either, so I don't want to spoil me or any of you guys who haven't read it yet. Then we have another mystery thriller. This one is called The Fury by Alex Michaelides. I also received an arc of this book. I haven't read anything by this author, I believe, yet. This thriller is about a reclusive ex-movie star and her famous friends who take a spontaneous trip to a private Greek island, and it ends up being upended because of a murder. We have another mystery thriller, and that is The Night of the Storm by Nishida Parekh. Oh boy, hopefully I said that right. This is this author's take on the classic locked room thriller, and it's about a multi-generational Indian American family, and they're all stuck in this house with a murderer during Hurricane Harvey. Next up, we have The Silence in Her Eyes by Armando Lucas Correa. This is another mystery thriller, and we're following our main character, Leah, who's been living with kinetosia, or motion blindness, since she was a child, and for the last 20 years, she hasn't been able to see movement. She, because of this, has a very heightened sense of smell. So when she gets home, she can smell immediately that something is wrong. She ends up befriending her neighbor who's going through this divorce, right? And one day when she comes back up to her apartment, she can smell something is off. And we have This Wretched Valley by Jenny Kiefer. This is a horror book. We're following Clay, his research assistant Sylvia, and Dylan's boyfriend Luke. Dylan is going to document her achievement on Instagram, which they're all going to this untouched cliff face in the Kentucky wilderness. They want to be basically the first person to climb it. 7 months later, 3 bodies are discovered in the trees. All are in various states of decay, but Dylan is still missing. Next up, we have another mystery thriller. If I haven't mentioned already, I will mention it now. There's going to be a lot of mystery thrillers coming out in the next few months that I'm interested in, so be prepared. There's going to be a lot in this video. And so we have Where You End by Abbott Collar, the author's fictional debut, and it's inspired by true events. It's following an unusual form of amnesia appends the lives of identical twins, forcing them to face the indelible danger shadow of the past. Next up, we have a science fiction novel, and that is Kinning by Nisi Shaw. This is the sequel to her debut novel Everfair, which continues the alternate history where bark-cloth airships soar through the sky, varied peoples build a new society together, and colonies claim their freedom from imperialist tyrants. I haven't read the first book, so I'll have to go back and read that first, but this one sounded really interesting. Next up, we have another mystery, and that is The Mysterious Case of the Alberton Angels by Janice Hallett. I haven't read anything from this author before, but I know the Twyford Code and The Appeal are two mysteries that have received a lot of recognition, but I haven't picked up anything from this author. This book is about a true crime journalist who revives a long-buried case about a cult and finds herself too close to the story. Another mystery thriller is Everyone on This Train is a Suspect by Benjamin Stevenson. Now, I went back and forth on whether I was going to read this book or not. I still am not sure if I'm absolutely sure if I'm going to, because I did listen to the first book that's like part of this series. Everyone in my family has murdered someone or something like that. And I thought it was okay. I wasn't like hugely blown away by it, but I do want to do think I want to give the sequel a chance and see how I feel about it. Another mystery thriller is Midnight on Beacon Street by Emily Ruth Verona. This is a thriller and love letter to vintage horror movies, where we're following a teenager who must overcome her own anxiety to protect the 2 children she's babysitting when strangers come knocking at the door. And then the last book that I want to mention that's coming out in the month of January is The Mayor of Maxwell Street by Avery Cunningham. This book takes place in 1921. We're following Nellie Sawyer, who's the daughter of the wealthiest Negro in America, whose affluence catapulted his family to the heights of Black society. After the unexpected death of her only brother, Nellie becomes the premier debutante overnight. But the past year, she's been working undercover as an investigative journalist, sharing the achievements and tribulations of everyday Black people living in the shadow of Jim Crow. And apparently, her latest assignment is putting her into the den of a dangerous vice lord. Now on to the books that are coming out in the month of February. First up, we have a Love Song for Ricky Wilde by Tia Williams. This is a romance, which I don't really read a lot of romances, but I really did enjoy 7 Days in June by this author, so I knew for sure whatever Tia Williams came out with next, I was going to pick up. So this book has something to do with leap years. Our main character is the impulsive artistic daughter of a powerful Atlanta dynasty, and she's opposite of her famous socialite sisters. She leaves her family behind and decides that she's going to open up a flower shop. One day, she encounters a handsome, deeply mysterious stranger who knocks her world off balance in the most unexpected way. Then we have Bright Red Fruit by Sophia El Hillo. This is a young adult book and it's told in verse. I don't really read a lot of young adult books, but I tend to like ones that are written in verse, and we're following a teenager's journey into the slam poetry scene, so it's very fitting that it's told in verse, and the dangerous new relationship that could threaten all her dreams. Next up, we have 14 Days, a collaborative novel by Douglas Preston and Margaret Atwood. I think this is very interesting. I'm very interested to see how this is a collaborative novel between both of these authors, but it's set in a Lower East Side tenement in the early days of COVID-19 lockdowns. Each character in this diverse, eccentric cast of New York neighbors has been secretly written by a different major literary voice, from Margaret Atwood, Anne Celeste Ng, to Tommy Orange and John Grisham. So this seems like a very weird, interesting, experimental novel, and I want to check it out and see if I like it or not. Then we have another mystery thriller that is Night Watching by Tracy Sierra. In this thriller, we're following a mother who's forced to the breaking point when her life and the lives of her children are threatened by an intruder. Then we have Redwood Court by Delana R.A. Demarin. This book follows our main character, Mika Tabor, who is the baby of the family, and she spends most of her time taking care of her loved ones, listening to their stories and stuff. She lives in this cul-de-sac in an all-Black working-class suburb of Columbia, South Carolina, where her grandparents live, and she learns important lessons from the people who raise her. This book is described as a celebration of ordinary people striving to achieve their own American dreams. Next up, we have Medea by Eilish Quinn. This is the author's retelling of the story of Medea, who is taken from Greek mythology. I don't really want to read too much into it because I'm not super familiar with all the Greek myths, and I don't want to spoil it for myself or you guys as well. The next book I'm going to have a hard time pronouncing. I think it's said Neferura. I'm going to go with that, Neferura, by Milena Evans. This is a historical fiction book set in Egypt, and we're following a princess and high priestess who's always dreamed of freedom, but freedom comes at a price. And we have The Blueprint by Ray Gianna Rashad. This is a science fiction novel. Choice no longer exists in Texas, and there's an algorithm that determines a Black woman's occupation, spouse, and residence. Our main character, Celine, finds solace in penning the biography of Henriette, an ancestor who had been an enslaved concubine to a wealthy planter in 1800s Louisiana. But history repeats itself when Celine, lonely and naive, finds herself entangled with Bastian Martin, a high-ranking government official. Then we have The Book Doors by Gareth Brown. This is a fantasy novel, and it follows Casey Andrews, who works in a New York City bookshop. One day, one of her most famous customers, a lonely yet charming old man, dies right in front of her. She has nothing to remember him by except the last book that he was reading, which was no ordinary book. It is The Book of Doors, which promises that any door is every door, you just have to know how to open them. And we have The Framed Women of Ardmore House by Brandy Schlace. I probably am butchering so many names in this video. And this is a mystery thriller in the cozy mystery vein. which I don't really have a lot of experience with reading, but this one sounded interesting. And it's the first book in a cozy mystery series starring an autistic, hyperlexic book editor who inherits a crumbling English estate only to find herself at the center of a murder investigation when a family portrait vanishes and a dead body shows up in the manor. Then we have another book in translation, and that is The Kamogawa Food Detectives by Hisashi Kashiwei, and Jesse Kirkwood is the translator on this one. This is also a mystery thriller. This is the first book in the mouthwatering Japanese series, which I guess is a bestseller. Apparently, there is this very special restaurant where they serve up deliciously extravagant meals, but that's not the only reason why the customers stop by, because the father-daughter duo are food detectives. They are able to recreate dishes from a person's treasured memories, which sounds really cool. We have another mystery thriller. This one is by the author Sarah Shepard, and it's called Nowhere Like Home. We're following Lena, who gets a call from her old friend, Rhiannon, who she's startled because Rhiannon disappeared years ago without a trace, and she's startled to learn that her friend actually has a son and that she lives off-grid with a group of women in a community called Halcyon. She invites Lena who is a new mother herself, to join her there, but I think things quickly turn weird. Next up, we have a book by Philip B. Williams, and it's called Hours. It's set in mid-19th century America, and it's about the spiritual cost of a freedom that demands fierce protection. It's described as a sweeping novel who we're following an enigmatic woman named Saint who annihilates plantations all over Arkansas to rescue the people enslaved there. Next up, we have another mystery thriller, no surprise there, and that is The Guest by B.A. Paris. This is described as a domestic suspense novel. We're following a couple who seem to have it all, but when a young man on his bicycle careens off the path of a nearby quarry to his death, Gabriel, the husband, is the one to find him and hear his final words. When the boy dies, Gabriel is left behind with the guilty burden. The next book I want to share is called Brooklyn by Tracy Brown. This is about a master manipulator and serial survivor who will scorch the earth to get what she wants. The question isn't who murdered her, the question is who wouldn't. So we're following Brooklyn Melody James, who's finally gotten the punishment she deserves after leaving a web of lies, heartache, and betrayal behind her. As her life slips away, Brooklyn remembers the events that shaped her into the cold, calculating creature she became. Then lastly, for the books that are coming out in February, we have The American Daughters by Maurice Carlos Ruffin. This book is a historical novel, and it's about a spirited girl who joins a sisterhood working to undermine the Confederates. Okay, last but not least, we have the books that are coming out in the month of March. First up, we have another mystery thriller, that is Murder Road by Simone St. James. In this book, we're following a young couple who find themselves haunted by a string of gruesome murders committed along an old, deserted road. And we have another mystery thriller, and that is The Hunter by Tana French. I have only read one book by Tana French before, and I think it was called Into the Woods. Maybe that one was it. I don't remember how much I liked it. It was like years ago. So I definitely want to try something else by this author. I think I enjoyed it, but I don't think nothing about it compelled me to continue on with that series. This novel takes place in the Irish countryside during the summer when two men arrive on a small village in the west of Ireland. One of them's coming home, both of them are coming to get rich, one of them is coming to die. Then we have The Tower by Flora Carr. This is a reimagining of Mary, Queen of Scots' darkest hour when she was held hostage in a remote Scottish castle with a handful of loyal women while plotting a daring escape to reclaim her country and her freedom. And we have All Our Yesterdays by Joel H. Morris. In this book, it's set 10 years before the events of Shakespeare's historic play about the ambition, power, and fate that define one of literature's most notorious figures, and that is Lady Macbeth. Then we have Pride and Joy by Louisa Onome. This is described as a heartwarming and hilarious novel about 3 generations of a Nigerian-Canadian family who were grappling with their matriarch's sudden passing while their auntie insists that her sister is coming back. Then we have Shakespeare's Sisters, How Women Wrote the Renaissance by Rami Targoff. This is a historical nonfiction book. This is about women writers in the English Renaissance. And it's looking at our notion of the Shakespearean period by drawing us into the lives of 4 women who were committed to their craft long before anyone possibly imagined having a room of one's own. Next up, we have The Phoenix Bride by Natasha Siegel. This is described as a passionate tale of plague, fire, and forbidden love in the 17th century London. It takes place during the year 1666, 1 year after plague has devastated England. We're following a young widow, Cecilia Thorogood, and she's a prisoner and trapped and isolated within her older sister's cavernous London townhouse. We have The Swan's Nest by Laura McNeill, and in this historical novel, it's about the unlikely love affair between two of the 19th century poets, and that's Robert Browning and Elizabeth Barrett. It tells the story of how they fell in love with each other's words and shocked her conservative, close-knit family and the literary world. Then we have Until August, which is a book in translation. The author is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. The translator is Anne McLean. This is a rediscovered novel from the author of Love in the Time of Cholera, which I have read, and 100 Years of Solitude, which I have not yet gotten around to reading. This is the story of Anna Magdalena, who's been happily married for 27 years, but once a year she escapes the life that she has with her husband and children. Every August, she travels by ferry to this island where her mother's buried and for one night takes a new lover. Next up, we have a nonfiction book called Wrong Is Not My Name, Notes on Black Art by Erica N. Cardwell. This book is a personal memoir and a criticism. It's looking at the work of Black visual artists as a means to explore loss, legacy, and the reclamation of life through art. Then we have You Get What You Pay For, which is an essay collection. This author's previous work that they won awards for was called Magical Negro. In this book, they're tracing the difficulty and beauty of existing as a Black woman through American history, from the foundational trauma of the slave trade all the way up to Serena Williams and the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Then we have Nearly All the Men in Lagos Are Mad, which is a short story collection by Damilare Kuku. This is an anti-rom-com collection, short story collection, that took Nigeria by storm. It's featuring 12 outrageous, bold, and laugh-out-loud stories about the perils and pitfalls of dating men in Lagos from a rising star of Nollywood. Then we have another mystery thriller, and this one is called The Mystery Writer by Sulari Jontil. Our main character abandons her career path as an attorney and shows up on her brother's doorstep with 2 suitcases and an unfinished novel. She's drawn into a hidden literary world in which identity is something that can be lost and remade for the sake of an audience. Her mentor is brutally murdered, and Theo wants to find the killer and for justice to be served. Next up, we have The Waves Take You Home by Maria Alejandra Barrios Vilez. In this book, we're following our main character who the death of her grandmother brings her home, where she must face the past in order to become the heir of not just the family restaurant, but of her own destiny. Then we have Where Sleeping Girls Lie by Farida Abike Imid. Oh, I really hope I said that right, but I have a feeling I did not. And this is a young adult mystery thriller book. And in Where Sleeping Girls Lie, it's a contemporary mystery. And we're following a girl who is new to a boarding school and discovers dark secrets and cover-ups after her roommate disappears. I really like the cover on this one. And then last but not least, we have Like Happiness by Ursula Villarreal Mora. I believe this is also another book that I was able to receive a advanced copy of. Is described as a searing debut about the complexities of gender, power, and fame, told through the story of a young woman's destructive relationship with a legendary writer. I believe this book is a nonfiction book. So those are all the books that I wanted to share with you guys today. That was quite a lot. I haven't counted them all up, but I know that was a lot of books. So congratulations to sticking around if you made it this far in the video. I hope that you were able to come across at least a few books you haven't heard of that you were interested in and want to add to your TBR over the next coming months. I'm sorry if I wasn't able to go as in-depth as you or I would have liked to about each of these books. I didn't want this video to be a million hours long, but don't forget to check them out online if you are interested in any of these. That way you can get even more in-depth book descriptions on all of these. If you plan on picking up any of these books in the next few months, let me know. Or if there's any books that are coming out between January and March that I didn't mention in this video that you think I would be interested in, let me know as well. And that's it for today. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I appreciate your guys' support so much, and I'll see you again in the next one. Bye.